Good afternoon and a warm welcome, especially to our civil society friends, to this CSO dialogue with ADB's President Massa. I am Chris Morris, head of ADB's NGO and Civil Society Centre and your host for today. Let me quickly explain the flow of today's session. Following some brief opening remarks from President Massa, there will be a dialogue with 4 civil society organizations who currently work in ADB's operations. This will be followed by a moderated Q&A using questions from an online call we reached out to civil society organizations over the last six weeks and collected a number of questions. But participants joining us today will also be able to, if you're registered and on the formal annual meeting site, to raise questions in the Q&A feature. Please vote or like questions as you see them, as we hope to show the most interesting ones and have a dialogue with the President, time permitting, after the initial session. I encourage you to focus your questions on policy issues for the President. Should other issues be raised, my team will try to get back to you at a later stage. And now it is my privilege to request President Massa to provide his opening remarks. President Massa.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to also extend a warm welcome to all our civil society organization partners to the 54th annual meeting. This is actually the second time that ADB is holding its annual meeting virtually due to the constraints of the COVID-19 pandemic. Last year, as you may remember, we couldn't have this meeting with you. I'm sorry about that due to the emergency, situation. But this time, we are very glad to be able to organize, in addition to our formal business sessions, a civil society program. So this year, the annual meeting theme is Collaboration for Resilient and Green Recovery. This theme provides an opportunity for us to reflect on how ADB and CSOs can continue to collaborate towards a resilient and green recovery for our region. I hope that all of you will actively participate in the discussions, especially those organized by our CSO partners over the next 3 days. We recognize the COVID-19 pandemic has forced many changes on our lives, personal and professional. Going virtual has increased opportunities for online dialogue, but this has also brought challenges. The digital divide has widened, creating communication gaps with grassroots organizations and our vulnerable and marginalized stakeholders who are not connected. We do rely on CSOs to help bridge these communication gaps. Despite the limitations posed by COVID-19, CSOs have maintained engagement in our operations and policy work over the last 12 months, both for tackling the crisis caused by COVID-19 and for addressing long-term development agenda. For example, ADB is pioneering a program to engage CSOs to reduce the impact of COVID-19 through demand-driven community-led interventions targeting the poor and vulnerable. Funded through a $2 million grant from the Japan Fund for Poverty Reduction, the project supports 5 CSO consortia in Armenia, Cook Islands, Laos, PDR, Mongolia, and the Philippines to expand their ongoing COVID-19 interventions on community-based crisis mitigation, social protection programs, and livelihood support for communities affected by the pandemic. Another example is in Nepal, where ADB's Youth for Asia team has supported the ADB-funded Bagmati River Basin Improvement Project by working with Nepalese youth-led CSOs engaging with young citizens across 20 grassroots communities. Local youth have successfully raised awareness to promote 3R. Those are reduce, reuse, and recycle of community waste to improve the local environment and contribute to the SDGs. Let me draw your attention to the emerging opportunity of collaboration. As many of you, ADB is helping our developing member countries procure safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines and deliver them efficiently and equitably through our $9 billion new financing facility called APVAX, Asia Pacific Vaccine Access Facility, that we announced last December. In parallel with our efforts, I expect that CSOs can raise community awareness and address vaccine hesitancy. Given that there are many CSOs that work as good health service providers at grassroots level in many developing countries, CSO can be an important force to ensure that safe and effective vaccines will be delivered to the most poor, marginalized, and vulnerable populations. And of course, CSO can also play an important monitoring role to ensure accountability and help to control any misuse of funding. Going forward, I also want to continue to identify opportunities to engage more systematically with CSOs in our country operations. For example, in Mongolia, where our new country partnership strategy, CPS, is under preparation, we have pledged to step up efforts to increase engagement with CSOs to strengthen project design and implementation, improve beneficiary feedback, implement social and environmental safeguards, and enhance gender inclusion. ADB will also deepen its work with CSOs in Mongolia through the Civil Society Advisory Committee, which was established in 2019 to ensure that our strategy, programs, and projects are evidence-based and reflect grassroots level priorities and needs. We also appreciate CSO's active participation in a number of ADB's policy reviews. The reviews of our safeguards policy statement, the energy policy, and the disaster and emergency assistance policy are all ongoing. In the case of the safeguard review, we have decided to extend the review period to 2023 in order to ensure there is adequate time for in-person meetings with grassroots stakeholders. On the other side, the energy policy consultation have attracted a lot of interest. I'd like to thank CSOs for the constructive and proactive engagement in the consultations to date. We have noted the concerns around fossil fuels, waste to energy, and safeguard impacts of geothermal and large hydropower projects, among others. Please be assured that we will carefully consider these elements as we continue our consultations and complete our new policy by COP26 in November. The energy policy and the wider climate agenda are of primary importance to us at ADB. The total climate financing from ADB resources from 2011 to 2020 was $36 billion. We have two ambitious climate financing targets in Strategy 2030. One is to reach $80 billion in cumulative climate financing for 2019 to 2030. And another one is 75%. Sorry. And another target is 75% of our total number of operations will contribute to either or both mitigating or adapting to the climate change. Sorry. both mitigating or adapting to the climate change impact by 2030. Let me make it clear that ADB keeps unwavering commitment in achieving these targets. ADB is also developing implementation guidelines that will enable our operations to align with the goals
Mr. President, would you like to take a short break or have a drink?
Okay, I'll be right back. Sorry.
Yes. Thank you. Let us just wait a couple of minutes. It seems like President Massa has something upsetting his throat for a while. I'm just getting a message through actually from the production team that one of our CSOs, we were hoping to have 4 CSOs on board with us today. Currently, only 3 are connected. We hope the 4th will be able to join us before we finish the event also. We'll give, I do want to say hello and welcome for those who are also following the event on Facebook Live and also on YouTube, as well as the official ADB annual meeting channel. Mr. President, are you comfortable?
Sorry,
right.
Something happened to my throat. I'm very sorry for that.
Indeed, it is most of the same. Please continue with your remarks.
All right, so guidelines. ADB is also developing implementation guidelines that will enable our operation to align with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Our climate initiatives are fully in line with the priorities of the upcoming COP26 being hosted by the UK. So in closing, I'd like to thank once again you, CSOs, for your active involvement and participation in the development of Asia and the Pacific. I trust that you will share your rich development experiences and expertise with peers and partners in the next 3 days. And I look forward to the day that I will be able to meet many of you in person once this pandemic is over. Thank you, and I'm now happy to take your questions. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you very much, President Massa. Let me now quickly introduce the representatives. As I say, we have 3 CSOs with us. First, from Pakistan, we have Munazza Rubab, who's a project officer with the Association of Gender Awareness and Human Empowerment, an NGO from the Punjab, ADB. We have 2 representatives from the NGO Forum on ADB, the international convener, 𝐂𝐤𝐞𝐞𝐧, and the executive director from the forum, Ryan Hassan. I'm very pleased to see Catherine Custodial with us today. She's the executive director of Worldwide Fund for Nature, that's WWF Philippines. We were also hoping that the global president of 𝐒𝐈𝐸𝐶 joined, and maybe she will come in later if we resolve the technical issues. Each CSO will introduce themselves and their organization and share a little bit about the work they do in partnership with ADB, and have the opportunity to ask the President Massa a question. So it gives me great pleasure now to start off this session with Ms. Rubab of ADB. Over to you to introduce your organization and address the President, please. Rubab, thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sayyida Munazza Rubab, project officer from ADB. Thank you for this opportunity to participate in this dialogue with ADB President Massa. ADB Foundation is the Association for Gender Awareness and Human Empowerment. It is a non-government social and development organization in Pakistan, established in 2007, working with VN to create an enabling environment for vulnerable segments of society where they can utilize their full potential for improvement in their lives and have equal opportunities to safeguard safeguard their rights. Agahi supports communities in the areas of disaster risk reduction, resilience, and governance, water, sanitation and hygiene, health and nutrition, and sustainable livelihood. Now Agahi is implementing ADB TA 9329, promoting urban resilience, climate change resilience in selected Asian cities through community-led projects. This project is funded by the ADB through the Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund, that is called UCCRFT, and it is a worth of 150 million trust fund administered by ADB under the Urban Financing Partnership Facility managed by the Urban Sector Group in SDCC with financing from the Rockefeller Foundation and the governments of Switzerland and United Kingdom. The goal of this project is to promote community-led initiatives as an essential component of effective urban resilience projects. The project tests processes that support the empowerment of vulnerable communities to integrate their needs and aspirations into local adaptation and resilience planning and actions. Agahi supports the community-led projects being implemented in Sialkot, Punjab district in Pakistan in partnership with Oxfam Pakistan. In Mubarakpura, Sialkot, the community have decided to develop a green park to help address the problem of rising temperatures and to provide inclusive and safe green community spaces for women, children, elderly, poor and vulnerable members of the community. Agahi is supporting the ADBTA by ensuring effective community engagement and continuous coordination with city authorities and stakeholders and lead community-focused activities. My question for the ADB President is, climate change adaptation interventions are needed and necessary at the grassroots and community level, for example, the Basti and Mohalla in Pakistan. What is the role of local governments in speeding up the implementation of climate resilience activities at the district level? And what is the future strategy of the ADB to strengthen climate resilience at community level? Thank you.
Okay. Shall I respond, Chris?
Please, Mr. President, respond directly.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Rubab-san. This is a very important question about the intersection of climate action and social development. The situation of the poor and vulnerable in the face of climate change is one of the main reasons why ADB commits to climate-related targets in our strategy 2030 that I mentioned in the opening remark, a 75% target and 80 billion cumulative climate financing amount. But the building community resilience is very much essential if we are to genuinely support people in tackling the critical and immediate threats of climate change. So we have been working extensively on community resilience through the so-called Urban Climate Change Resilience Trust Fund, which is one of the many trust funds for several years, where we have been working with organizations at the community level, such as yourself and here, Pakistan, and your partner organization, Oxfam, as well. ADB has recently launched the Community Resilience Partnership Program, CRPP, which aims to further expand climate adaptation interventions at a local level. And we are now seeking for possible donors for this very important program. In general, our experience shows there are three principles we need to follow. First, we need to build the resilience of the poor and the marginalized women and men. For example, we will invest in climate-smart agriculture that improves water management and harvesting techniques and builds capacity of women farmers to use climate information for crop planning purposes. Second, finance has to reach the hands of the poor and especially poor women. This means using methods such as conditional cash transfers and targeted microfinance. And thirdly, it is vital that we strengthen governance processes, including participatory planning, budgeting and monitoring, and meaningful participation of citizens in resilience-related decision-making. So this approach to localizing governance and the decision-making process is also propelling our work on localizing the SDGs in general. About 2/3 of the 169 SDG targets involve subnational governments, as you know. So we will work with local governments to build capacity to help them accelerate their progress at a local level to achieve the SDGs, and with citizens to monitor progress and ensure services meet their needs. Thank you. Thank you for your very important question.
Okay, thank you, President Massa and Rubab from AGAHE. Certainly very valuable work going on at a community level in ADB's urban projects in the Punjab. Thank you for joining us. So I would now like to call upon Hemantha from the NGO Forum to introduce your organization and pose your questions to President Massa. Hemantha.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm from Sri Lanka and greeting from the NGO Forum and ADB in the occasion of 54th Annual General Meeting. And thanking you, Mr. President, for giving us the opportunity to raise our concerns. This is our first meeting with you since you took the office. I thank ADB for keeping this tradition, for having the meeting with the civil society during all these ADB annual general meetings. COVID-19 pandemic is still ongoing. ADB historical negligence on public health infrastructure, access to public service, and social protection is also contributing factor to the current crisis in the member countries. ADB continue to finance fossil fuel projects, including coal, gas, and energy policy 2009 is not aligned with Paris 1.5-degree goal. More and more climate refugees are clearly visible in the member countries. Global debt has risen to $263 trillion, and COVID-19 recovery loans of $20 billion climate finance $80 billion are also impacting the national debt and inequality. Persecution of human rights and environmental defenders and losing civil society space is a major concern for us. We see how the military coup such as Myanmar is killing people who voice for democracy. We commend ADB on freezing all loans to Myanmar as per March 2001 official announcement. The ADB in 2021 is reviewing Energy Policy 2009 and soon to review the Safeguard Policy 2009. Both policies, as well as following the co-labor standards, will prove to be pivotal in setting the region on the path to green recovery. The theme of this year's annual meeting is collaboration for resilient and green recovery. This can never be achieved unless the fossil fuel industry, private sector, governments, and the multilateral banks, including Asian Development Bank, urgently heed the call to limit the warming temperature of the planet. To this end, under your leadership, Mr. President, we want to flag following 3 issues. Since 2014, ADB has no longer invested in any new coal projects. Can ADB thus commit to complete withdrawal from new and existing coal finance as recommended by the IED on Energy Policy 2020? Question number 2, as for 2019, gas is the leading contributor to the global fossil emissions. Whilst coal emissions are declining, ADB continue to be the second largest gas financier with the support of the fossil bias consultants in the member countries. Can ADB commit to a limit bound phase out from gas finance in line with the Paris 1.5-degree target? ADB still affirms support to thermal waste to energy systems. Can ADB show real climate leadership by excluding thermal waste to energy from all its financial investment instruments? Can ADB commit to assessing prioritizing viable solar and wind solutions as energy solutions and thereby removing large hydro and geothermal projects from being classified as renewable energy solution? I will ask the other three questions later.
Okay, thank you, Himasa-san. So you asked me three questions. One is about fossil fuel financing in general. Second question is concerning gas financing. And third question was about thermal and also hydro, in the context of waste energy issue. Okay, for your first question concerning fossil fuel financing, first of all, as you know, ADB has not financed coal-fired energy since 2013. 2013 was the last year we did finance coal-fired energy and commits to support developing member countries with clean and reliable energy. So concerning coal, as you know, once again, while our new energy policy is currently being consulted with our shareholders and also stakeholders, including you, CSOs. And actually, I don't want to preempt any decision of our board. We are aiming at finalizing this revision of our energy policy by the timing of COP26 this year. But ADB, I can tell you that ADB will seriously consider exploring a formal withdrawal from financing new coal power generation and heating. Concerning gas, regarding natural gas, we recognize that supporting natural gas projects in DMCs as a transition towards more renewable sources of energy are not necessarily against the Paris goals, because natural gas can replace coal to reduce carbon emissions, increase access to clean cooking and heating, and play a balancing role to support intermittent renewable energy. However, our future support for natural gas will be subject to very strict screening criteria, so that investments are consistent with national long-term low carbon pathways and avoid long-term carbon lock-in in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Relatedly, about the Paris Agreement, Paris Alignment Initiative, as you know, ADB together with other MDBs jointly consulted stakeholders in November 2020, and ADB especially also engaged on the topic with the NGO forum during a dialogue in December 2020. We understand CSO's main concern is how these efforts are being reflected in ADB's new energy policy, which I mentioned. As I have indicated earlier, ADB is developing implementation guidelines that will enable our operations to align with the goals of Paris Agreement. And ADB is trying to announce when we will achieve Paris alignment by COP26 in November this year. About the waste to energy support, we consider that support for the circular economy, including waste to energy as one option, is also likely to continue, depending on the final decision by the board, of course, on the new energy policy. Waste to energy provides opportunities for integrated cross-sectoral projects, targeting the livelihoods of the poorest of the poor, working in waste value chain, for example, in recycling. It also enhances livability and health by removing the environmental hazards caused by open waste dumping. So while we recognize the concern, your concern on emission of greenhouse gas and other hazardous material from the incineration of the waste, it is important to recognize that incineration is a last resort, and there are many productive uses for waste before the final small fraction may be turned into energy. One final words on hydro. There will be a large hydro. That issue will be addressed once again in our ongoing energy policy review. And I welcome the ongoing dialogue with the forum members and you on this. ADB considers geothermal and hydropower energy as renewable energy sources, as well as solar, wind, and ocean energy. Based on wide strategic environment assessment and comprehensive due diligence, and the safeguards, of course, are undertaken for all our hydropower projects. For large or complex projects, we often include the engagement of international panel of independent experts. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for those answers, and we will continue to engage with the energy policy review in the coming months. And also, we expect some radical changes in the ADB's view, moving towards the renewable pathway because of climate emergency. So my second set of questions are related to the safeguard policy context. In the upcoming ADB safeguard policy review, the ADB also ensure that stakeholder engagement plan for upcoming safeguard review will ensure the civil society and the project affected community voices be meaningfully consulted throughout the process, keeping in mind the need for on-site field investigations, face-to-face dialogues when pandemic restrictions are lifted. During the pandemic, we understand you cannot do the field visits, but without such kind of consultations, it's very hard to learn what has happened on the ground. So on that context, I want to ask a few questions. Mr. President, can you commit to the upcoming policy review will not dilute existing safeguards? This is a very important question for us. With over $80 million spent on the CSS strengthening, ADB has not been able to implement CSS use in Indonesia, India, Sri Lanka, Kyrgyzstan, and any other country. Can the ADB commit to upholding its own SPS policy until CSS reaches equivalency after due assessment? How can the new SPS ensure that financial intermediaries and private sector borrowers be brought to a strict compliance on ADB safeguard policy and the ADB accountability mechanism? In the light of ongoing review of SPS, what legacy under your presidency you can deliver for ensuring ILO co-convention and occupational standard will be directly referenced in the new SPS? Thank you, Mr. President.
Could I ask the forum, Ryan, could you also intervene with your statement or any questions? I'm conscious of time, and there are quite a lot of questions coming in externally, please. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. I'll just go right to it, Mr. President, and glad to finally see you and speak to you for the first time. I'll bring to your attention 3 particular ADB finance projects where we are dealing with compensation and land acquisition complications on the ground. The first one is the Tanaho Hydropower project in Nepal, which is currently an OSPF complaint. Due to COVID-19 restrictions, there have been delayed investigations. OSPF could not get on the ground and do the necessary assessments of the complaint. In the meantime, construction of a dam is currently underway. So the local communities who work with the NGO forum along with local NGO partners are basically calling for a suspension of the project construction amid this pandemic until the grievances have been addressed, which include land for land compensation, redress for impacts on collective resources and property. So this is from the affected Magar community in Nepal. The second project I want to bring your attention to is in India. It's the Kolkata Environmental Improvement Investment Project Tranche 2. There are multiple street vendors who sell tea and electrical shops and such. These street vendors have been displaced because of the construction of the water and drainage pipes being laid in the road project. And this has resulted in a loss of livelihood. Originally, the construction was supposed to be for 3 months and the compensation was supposed to be provided for 3 months, and that was back in 2019. Construction is still ongoing and the project has been delayed. So the pandemic hit and all of a sudden these shopkeepers could not put their shops back on. Some by 2021 were brave enough to put their shops back on, but local project developers and extremely aggressive in an aggressive manner had forced them to evict again. So we definitely seek rightful compensation for the total loss of period for the number of months of their livelihood, which is now extended to over a year. And this displacement would not have happened if ADB had not financed the project. So we definitely would seek your oversight in this matter urgently. The situation is very dire in India, as you know. The last project is in Mongolia. It's the Gare Area Development Investment Program and Affordable Housing Urban Renewal Project. It's been an OSPF complaint since 2018. Many affected communities, I think in our estimates, 3,000 to 500 people have been affected in resettlement. Some cash compensations have been given, but the problem is right now more and more people are being affected by this project, and the issue is actually around land compensation. The communities are calling for land compensation with the same title, or an adequate size apartment so that the families can live with the financial support. As you understand, the Mongolian winter is very harsh. It's minus 40 degrees. So when they were resettled into tents, a lot of people got sick, especially women and young children. So it's not just cash compensation, it will just not do. Secondly, on this project, the OSPF did help reach a memorandum of understanding in 2018, which allowed for compensation and which would have been agreeable by the people. But this 2018 MOU was never implemented. Even now, we filed a second complaint. The MOU is still unrecognized. So these are areas which will require oversight. And I just want to stress that it's a pandemic scenario. And these are the communities who do not have the luxuries which we even enjoy as civil society. So the urgent response in this matter will be highly encouraged. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Okay, thank you, Hemantha and Ryan. Maybe, Mr. President, I can quickly summarize in the interest of time, asking for a commitment in the safeguards review that ADB will not be diluting our safeguards. And the three projects which Ryan has brought up, the challenges of engaging with our safeguards during the COVID-19. If you could respond to those two issues very briefly, please.
Okay, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Hemantha, thank you, Ryan. Well, about Hemantha's strong interest in SPS, thank you very much for your strong interest, of course. As you mentioned, ADB management initiated the policy review and update process in August 2020 following corporate evaluation of the SPS safeguard policy statement by ADB's IED, Independent Evaluation Department, in May last year. And it's expected to be completed in March 2023. To ensure meaningful consultation and communication in the review process, with a draft stakeholders engagement plan SCP is already available for public comments on the ADB website, as you mentioned. We will undertake stakeholder consultation to cover project affected people, CSOs, government officials, and private sector representatives from both DMCs and non-DMCs to ensure ADB incorporates a range of different perspectives into the new policy review. We have already had quite intensive discussions with CSOs, including the NGO forum on ADB, to feed into the SCP. We have committed to extend this review process to March 2023, recognizing the current difficulties in undertaking person-to-person, face-to-face meetings with local grassroots, CSOs, affected persons, vulnerable groups, and including indigenous people due to the current pandemic situation. The dilution of standards, expanded use of CSS, country safeguard systems, and also expanding private sector portfolio use of FIs, financial intermediaries. These are all very important points you raised related to the ongoing safeguard policy statements review. I can assure you that ADB has zero intention to diluting our safeguards. which we recognize as a significant value add to our operations. During the review, we will undertake stakeholder consultations to cover project-affected people and so on, CSOs and so on. And we are also conducting a series of specific studies of ADB safeguard activities and global good practice, which will feed into the review. We will specifically look at country safeguard system, as you mentioned, CSS, private sector portfolios and financial intermediaries, FI, which you correctly raise as important. So let me also stress now that the use of CSS on FI does not relieve ADB of its due diligence and loan supervision responsibilities. And it does not alter the role of ADB's accountability mechanism. Similarly, a public or private sector project have to adhere fully to ADB's safeguard standards. Concerning the Alliance issue raised by Alliance, actually he quoted the three concrete projects. So I agree. We acknowledge, we agree that meaningful consultations are very challenging during this pandemic period. And however, we are very much committed to fulfilling our safeguard requirements, and we emphasize that meaningful consultation and grievance redress mechanisms must be implemented in full. Let me share some of the steps taken by ADBs under the pandemic concerning two projects you mentioned. We are testing and using where appropriate adaptive mechanisms such as online tools, phone-based apps, drones, social media, etc., to conduct public consultations and manage project grievance redress mechanisms. In Tanaho, Nepal, where the community is remote and does not have access to internet, we were able to connect with communities using Zoom via satellite internet connection, facilitated by the Nepal Resident Mission. We also have a national team on the ground engaging the complainants and their supporting NGOs, including an anthropologist, a mediator, and a 𝐒𝐲𝐢𝐈 IP specialist. In Mongolia jail areas, which you also mentioned, where there is generally good access to internet, we did provide training for complainants on how to use Zoom, and we have made sure affected people had access to laptops. With the support of the OSPF, national facilitator, negotiations with complainants are progressing well, and several cases have already been closed. And all in all, the special project facilitator, Warren Evans, and his team are closely monitoring progress on these and other current cases and engaging virtually on a regular basis. So we would welcome further advice from you, CSOs, on your experience and good practice approaches. Thank you very much for your valuable inputs.
Okay, thank you very much from the NGO Forum, Ryan and Hemantha, and for President Massa in your responses there. I would point out during the civil society program of this annual meeting, the forum is leading two sessions, one tomorrow on civil society reflections on COVID-19, and on Wednesday in reviewing ADB's energy policy to meet the Paris goals. So we hope that there will be a good attendance from those participating today, and I thank the forum for leading those two sessions. So let me move on now to one of our long-term partners, WWF, from this year, ADB is celebrating 20 years of partnership with them. So it's my great pleasure to introduce, as a trusted partner, 𝐂𝐞𝐞𝐭𝐲, who is the Executive Director based here in the Philippines. Catherine, please.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you and good afternoon, President Massa, WBF celebrated a special anniversary last week, our 60th, making us just a few years older than the ADB. And as Chris said, this year also marks the 20th anniversary of our partnership, under which we've collaborated in areas ranging from coral reef conservation to tracking environmental degradation across the region. And lately, we've been working on reducing plastic waste pollution and other aspects of blue economy. And I'd like to invite you and all participants to join the event immediately after this one on how improved coastal and marine resource management can contribute to a green, resilient, and equitable COVID-19 recovery. The region has indeed seen tremendous economic progress during the lives of our organizations. But tragically, this has been accompanied by a rapid decline in the health and breadth of our ecosystems, such as forests, wetlands, mangroves, and coral reefs. These natural ecosystems are vital to rural livelihoods and resiliency, regulating water, pollinating crops, providing ecotourism jobs, and much more. Deforestation is also a major contributor to global carbon emissions, and the region is moving far too slowly to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels. The science tells us that 2020 is the year we must begin to turn these trends around by accelerating action on biodiversity loss and climate change. ADB has made environment one of its core pillars in its 2030 strategy, approved in 2018. Operational Priority 3, OP3, focuses on tackling climate change, building climate and disaster resilience, and enhancing environmental sustainability. It also highlights that to sustain economic growth, ADB's developing country members must tackle natural capital degradation and decline, including biodiversity loss. OP3 acknowledges that the region's high biodiversity supports the region's economies and delivers a range of goods and services that sustain livelihoods, support food production, provide water and energy security, and provides resilience to climate and disaster risks. It highlights the importance of aligning ADB operations and support to developing member countries to the CBD, the Convention on Biological Diversity. So my question to you, President Massa, as the bank is currently working on its biodiversity strategy and roadmap, what assurance can ADB provide to Asia-Pacific NGOs and countries that the strategy will be transforming the bank's portfolio of projects and investments at a scale that we need to reverse biodiversity loss? So how can the ADB be much more aggressive in addressing the causes and impacts of climate change and nature loss? For example, will you require that COVID-19 recovery funding must support ecosystem health?
Okay, thank you, Catherine, for those questions. First, let me start with ADB's involvement, investment in healthy oceans, natural capital, or ADB's our climate commitments. Of course, ADB recognizes it's a very long time partnership for 20 years with WWF and your significant contribution to advancing ADB's knowledge and operations related to sustainable infrastructure, nature-based solutions, blue economy, and water resources management, biodiversity in general. We look forward to continued collaboration, very close collaboration in these important areas. As I mentioned earlier, under Strategy 2030, ADB is committed to reach 80 billion in cumulative climate financing for 2019 to 2030, and to ensure that 75% of our total number of operations contribute to mitigation and or adaptation by 2030. Our work on climate change adaptation and resilience includes addressing nature loss and enhancing nature conservation to help the region achieve interlinked goals for climate and biodiversity. Let me highlight, first of all, two areas where ADB is working to address nature loss and conservation. Firstly, on healthy oceans and blue economy programs. Our action plan for healthy oceans and sustainable blue economies aims to expand our financing for ocean health and the blue economy to $5 billion between 2019 and 2024. Under the current action plan, we are focusing on three main areas: reducing plastics pollution, improving coastal resilience, and enabling blue finance. On reducing plastic pollution, our programs emphasize policy reform, national and city-level action plans, investment preparation, capacity building, and innovative finance. Currently, we are focusing in Indonesia, PRC, China, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. On coastal resilience, the ADB WWF partnership is looking at opportunities for raising awareness, coastal planning, and nature-based solutions to climate change, as well as a larger scale investment for wetland, mangroves, and coral reefs. Our work includes a focus on Indonesia, Pakistan, and the Pacific. On blue finance, ADB has developed an ocean finance framework, and ocean health and biodiversity are added as one of the funding areas for Asian Development Fund, ADF. In addition, we launched the Asian Catalytic Green Finance Facility, ACGFF, which is supporting the development of bankable blue and green projects. Secondly, on natural capital investments. Natural capital investments by ADB. We are developing an ADB Nature Positive Investment Roadmap and a regional natural capital lab, expanding on our experiences in East Asia and the Mekong sub-region. This lab and an associated financing facility will catalyze much needed investment designed to support biodiversity, while at the same timing addressing climate change, improving food security, and generating green jobs. Finally, biodiversity in general. The Asia and Pacific region has the most diverse ecosystems in the world, as you know. So they support the region's economies and people's livelihood, and they provide resilience against climate change and disasters. But they are under severe stress right now. ADB is stepping up our efforts to support countries to tackle ecosystems degradation and biodiversity losses. We are in the process of developing what we call a Nature Positive Investment Roadmap, which aims to enable nature positive investment to be scaled up. This roadmap will also help align nature and climate agendas in the run-up to Biodiversity COP15 in October and the Climate COP26 in November. Finally, relatedly, we are also stepping up our work on ocean health, blue economy, and marine literature, as I already mentioned. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much, Catherine, for joining us today, and President Massa for responding to that question. I am conscious of time. We were hoping to get Ms. Eva Dutari from the global civil society organization, 𝐈SEC, the world's largest youth-led organization, but we've had technical issues there, and but I do have an advanced copy of the question from 𝐈SEC. 𝐈SEC is the world's largest youth-led organization with over 40,000 members, active in 120 countries, including active chapters in some 500 universities. ADB has had a partnership agreement with 𝐈SEC since 2015 to work and bring young people into ADB's operations. And I understand the question that young people of the region were very, very interested in was President Massa to share his views on how young people can meaningfully engage in ADB's operations, and how can we as a bank work with young people for contributing to the Sustainable Development Goals.
Chris and Eva, we miss you, but thank you for your insights and raising these very important issues. ADB's Youth for Asia initiative has benefited greatly from the partnership with 𝐈SEC since 2015 in bringing young people into our operations, particularly local DMC youth, including the vulnerable and marginalized. ADB will continue to prioritize investing in young human capital through education and health programs, social protection, and quality jobs, especially for the poor, the vulnerable, and the marginalized. Moreover, given that low-income countries have relatively larger youth population, we do recognize the region will only recover quickly if young people are productive assets for our DMCs. ADB's Youth for Asia initiative, which partners with 𝐈SEC, is a good example of meaningful youth engagement since it involves intergenerational partnerships with young people in project design work across ADB's operations departments. For example, in 2018, 123 youth ambassadors from 25 provinces led a project on improving financial literacy and access to financial services in Indonesia. Young people were chief implementers of the research and advocacy campaigns leading to Youth Insights, the biggest ever survey of young people on financial inclusion in Asia Pacific. The project was instrumental in informing the development of the Indonesian government's national youth financial inclusion strategy. I encourage such participation of young minds as partners of ADB working towards a resilient, inclusive, and green recovery across the region. We definitely see the potential to increase meaningful youth engagement in ADB's operations and knowledge work, focusing on the vulnerable and the marginalized population. On the SDGs, ADB sees localizing the SDGs as an essential driver for accelerated results. And this must include local young citizens who have the innovation and the drive to take action. I want to see ADB working with our DMCs, supporting more youth organizations to create genuinely innovative ideas and to support replication and upscaling. I once again thank 𝐈SEC and other youth organizations committed to the SDGs and the development of the region. You are a good example of youth leadership and active partners, which the region needs as countries bounce back from the pandemic.
Okay, and thank you very much, President Massa. I'm conscious we only have 2 minutes left, so we're not going to go to the Q&A. I do apologize. It is certainly more challenging trying to moderate a session virtually with civil society. I much prefer the in-person, and I hope that in the future we can continue our collaborations and engagement in person. I would like to thank Rubab, Hemantha, Ryan, and Catherine for joining us today. Can I conclude by encouraging all participants here today to register and join the rest of the civil society program this week. It is led by civil society organizations. We have five sessions. The first of which is led by WWF, as Catherine indicated, entitled Collaboration for a Resilient and Green Recovery. Realizing the potential of a sustainable blue economy. And this session starts actually here online in 30 minutes. So we just have time for a quick break. President Massa, can I turn to you for any final words? Very quickly, as we have less than a minute.
All right. Well, civil society organizations, CSOs, have very unique strengths, which can be valuable for ADB to enhance its development effectiveness. At the project level and also at the policy level, both of levels. So CSO engagement is a continuous process which goes on year around. And in this regard, I am very pleased to see a keen interest and engagement from CSOs in ADB's work. And I greatly appreciate your valuable input. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for all the participants today, particularly those who have joined online. So from ADB headquarters here in Manila, I wish you all a pleasant evening. Thank you for joining. Stay safe and healthy with your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Mr.
Chris. Thank you,
President.
Mr. President.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you, Mr.
Bye-bye.
President.